Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Build Your Copywriting Business podcast. Hello, friend.
Hello, hello.
Hello. As always, I am joined by my spectacular co-host, Kate Sitars. Hello, Kate.
Hello, hello.
Hello. And today, Kate and I have the pleasure of being joined by Christina Lenkowski, who is a PR superstar, and through her company, Publicity by Christina, helps big business owners, small business owners, even freelancers like you, my friends, get the word out about themselves and about their business. And I think today we're going to dig into, especially, it's very meta, we're going to talk about podcast guesting and how to get your message out there by being a guest on podcasts, which, full transparency, Christina has worked with us to do. If you have heard me on a podcast, there's a decent chance that it was Christina's team that got me onto that podcast because they're that good. So we're excited to talk. Hello, Christina. Welcome.
Hello to you both. I am so excited to be here. I was telling the ladies before we hit record, I was listening to episodes this morning and I was reacting in real time. And I think that my dog absolutely thought I was going crazy, but I'm ready to get in there, chat about all these things, be super real about what this looks like, what this tactic looks like, and also what it can do for the businesses of your listeners. I'm super excited.
Yes, I'm excited too. I think that as copywriters, I think we tend to default to, I'm going to do outreach by writing. I'm going to write things. I'll send, certainly our students know to send pitches, but I'll post things on LinkedIn or I'll post things on Instagram. And I think that the idea of being on podcasts just doesn't occur to copywriters, I think, especially. What kind of an opportunity are we looking at here, Christina? How can it benefit someone looking to build their service business?
I will say you need to look no further than the latest US election to see how important guesting on podcasts is for building your brand. Okay. So I'm not talking about the results either way. That has nothing to necessarily do with it. It really has to do, though, with the fact that these candidates, and one particularly more than other, went onto podcasts and really had conversations that humanized them to a lot of people. The fact of the matter is, so many people get their information, their entertainment, etc., from podcasts. That is really how it works. They are not, I think about myself, I'm never watching the news. I'm never watching these programs that are on late at night, where they're interviewing people in that way. That's not to say some people don't, but it's just to say that a lot more people are getting their information, entertainment, whatever it is, through a podcast platform. So I want you to just think about that. And, even if you haven't thought about it for yourself and you're like, well, yeah, that's a huge, candidate, that's a public figure, et cetera, take it down completely smaller into the business world. And the fact of the matter is, you have to be getting in front of new audiences if you want your business to grow. And things like social media are wonderful. Like, I'm not here to say that those things aren't great. They're great for building your brand, particularly once someone knows about you. But it is very hard to get in front of new people through that avenue. And so you have to be taking steps to get in front of new people. And Nicki, I know, you guys are big believers in ads. So paid is a wonderful way to bring people into your world. And publicity, earned media, which is where podcast publicity or other kinds fall in, is another really great way to keep broadening your reach in front of new people that wouldn't have heard about you otherwise.
That makes a lot of sense. And this is a little bit unfair because I didn't tell you I was going to ask this question in advance, but in case you know off the top of your head, do we know anything about the demographics of people who tend to listen to podcasts?
Yes. Millennials and younger are the biggest listeners of podcasts. So that particularly means that those of us, and as an elder millennial, I will say, at 42, I'm strong, at that is where we get a lot of our information. I think it's something like they get 70 to 80% of their information from podcasts, and that kind of arena there. And so the numbers are huge, the stats are huge, and they just continue to grow year over year. With that being said, even those older demographics are growing. So it's not to say that people, Gen X and above aren't listening to podcasts. They absolutely are. It's just becoming more of a thing in their world as they go into it, right? Like, my dad, bless his heart, in his 70s, he's just starting to kind of find out about, but he's looking at his history podcasts, doing whatever. finding his things, having a good time. But that's like how, they're kind of getting into that as well. But just like any new technology, it's just taking a little bit longer to kind of get there. And the main reason why so many of us like get a lot of our information from podcasts is because we just like that audio only option, right? We want to be doing it while we're multitasking, right? Like, hey, I'm taking my kid to school. I'm going to listen to a appropriate podcast. You know what I mean? I'm on my walk. I'm going to listen to a podcast. Literally, I listen to a podcast while I'm doing the dishes at night, right? Like yeah, you get it.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know what I'm saying? So like, we're kind of doing it during all these different times. And so I think that's what makes it especially appealing to these younger generations is, okay, I don't have to just sit and put all my attention and my focus on this one thing. I can be doing other stuff, but still getting the information that I want.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. Now, when we talk about, candidates being on these big podcasts, I'm sure that people are thinking, all right, well, that's great, but there's no way I'm going to get on these giant podcasts. But what are the benefits of getting on a podcast that doesn't have that kind of reach? And how many podcasts are there out there? What does the opportunity look like? Hey there, it's Nicki. I wanted to take a very quick minute to make sure that you knew about our free on-demand copywriting training. Now, whether you are brand new to copywriting or you've been doing it for a while, but you just can't seem to hit those income goals, this training is for you. You are going to learn the 3 secrets to landing freelance copywriting work without relying on frustrating job bidding sites like Upwork or Fiverr, or without cold calling strangers. And if you've watched any of the student success stories on this channel, and if you haven't yet, check them out. This is the exact same training that they all started with. And I mean students like Kate K, who is making 6 figures working part-time and retired her husband to help her build her business. Students like Stuart, who replaced his full-time salary, which was a good one, with his freelance income and then some. Stacy, who hit 6 figures in her first 6 months as a freelance copywriter, and Ashley, who landed the in-house copywriting job of her dreams. They all started with this free training, and you can start with this free training too. So sign up right now at freecopywritingtraining.com.
I love you asked this question because I think this is such an important point to make, which is getting on big podcasts is great for your visibility. Okay. So like, it's wonderful to be able to say, hey, I was on this show. That puts a lot of credibility on you, as a business owner, when someone's like, oh, wow, I've heard you on XYZ show, et cetera. But when it comes to making money, which is what we're all here to do, our clients make way more money by going on niched podcasts that a lot of times are smaller podcasts because people really trust that host. They are super invested in what those hosts are saying, and it gives instant credibility when you arrive on their platform. Okay. So that's why I always like to say to people is like, don't get caught up in the numbers because the numbers aren't what's going to make you money. I would always rather be in front of, let's say, 100 of my ideal customers that are ready to spend as opposed to 10,000 people that don't give about what I have to talk about. Okay. So I want you to know that like, people sometimes get on calls with me and they're like, yeah, I don't know, like maybe I could just be on like Joe Rogan or Oprah's show. And I'm just like, what? But like, you haven't even been on a podcast. You know what I mean? So like, we also have to like temper those expectations of you're also going to need to go on a bunch of these other shows before you're going to get on bigger shows. You know what I mean? In that realm too. But that doesn't mean that these smaller shows, again, if they're the right audience, are in any way a waste of time.
Well, it makes sense, right? Like sure, for maybe to make yourself feel good, it'd be great to be on Oprah's podcast. But at the same time, if you are a freelance copywriter and you're looking to land copywriting clients, which means you're looking to get in front of business owners, you're looking to get in front of maybe marketing directors, Oprah's audience is full of people who are not that. So It makes a lot of sense that you would want a more targeted podcast.
Although I want to be one of Oprah's favorite things. I would love to be one of her
I wouldn't turn Oprah down.
Yeah, exactly.
Put it out. You know what I mean? But I do think that your point that you're making is very, clear, which is like, that may not be who you really ultimately need to be getting in front of to make that money, have that return that you're looking. And I know you guys aren't big niche or, niche down people, but if there is a couple areas that you're like, hey, I really love to work with clients in these particular, areas, be getting on shows that those people are listening to, right? Like, it truly doesn't matter if it's 100 people, if it's 1,000 people, if it's 10,000 people. You couldn't take on 1,000,000 new clients, right? But you could take on a couple. And so if it's the right audience and the right fit, like, that's going to be a way better bang for your buck, in my opinion, than, again, just kind of trying to go for the biggest.
I love that. And it doesn't, to your point, it doesn't mean that you are choosing a niche as a copywriter to go on a podcast about, financial software. It's just that it shows that you are open to clients in the financial software space. And I don't know why that was the first one that came off the top of my head, but that
I don't know, but I love it. I was like, yeah,
no, obviously. So many financial software podcasts. Maybe that's not a great example, but there's probably at least a couple of them.
Well, and there's a ton of finance ones, right?
True.
So like, even if you were to take that a step further, like if you were like, yeah, like, this is an area that I could work on. Let me focus right now on like seeing if I can get on some finance-based podcast. There's a ton of those, y'all. I was just at FinCon in Atlanta. Whew, there's a lot of people in that space, right? Doing that type of work. So there's a ton of opportunity there.
Yeah. And the podcast space continues to grow. Am I correct?
Yes. Oh, yes. Year after year. You did ask me that. Sorry. And I got real heated about my answer on something else. But there are over 1 million podcasts. And I think that is something that you need to keep in your brain. I don't want that to overwhelm you. I just want you to realize that there are so many opportunities out there to be getting in front of audiences. Because you think about it, and it's like, everyone listens to different stuff, even in my own household, what I listen to versus what my partner listens to is very different. He's listening to sports and, that type of stuff. I say it like that type of stuff because I'm not paying attention, but like that, and then I'm listening to a lot of like entrepreneurship, like business owner stuff, et cetera. And then together we listen to true crime, very much like everyone kind of has their things and their different reasons, I found it to be very interesting, but this is something interesting for those that like to work with folks that are in corporate. A lot of people that are in corporate, they turn to podcasts for entertainment, for relief. They are not necessarily like my husband. If he were to listen to my business podcast, he would be like, what the frick? Like, like he'd just be like, I don't want to think about work right now. Like, I don't want to be doing whatever. I want to just be doing what I want to do. And so the reason I say that is if you're looking to get in front of corporate clients, then that may be a good opportunity to be like, hey, maybe I need to get on shows that skew more towards entertainment, right? And to be kind of talking about writing in that form, right? Or these people that are kind of listening in that way. And so there's a lot of strategy that goes into it, absolutely. But every person, every listener is going to be different in what they're going for. So that's why there's so much opportunity and more podcasts literally being made every single day. Like people start podcasts all the time. And so there's just so much opportunity.
Yeah. Well, and as people are thinking about that strategy, as we kind of talk about like, all right, so I this is maybe a show I'd like to be on. Maybe it's a business coach who teaches other business owners, and who needs copywriters? Business owners. Or to your point, maybe it is a little bit more entertainment based, but they get a lot of marketing directors or whatever, what have you. How can someone start approaching the idea of reaching out to a podcast? What are a good couple of first steps?
I love this question because I also know that there are a ton of y'all out here listening to this and you're like, I will never do this. Like you're like, I'll never be on a show. I'll never pitch myself. Like I to a show, et cetera, like kind of feeling this way. So let's kind of go over that a little bit. And the first thing I want to say is,
please,
all my introverts out there, I know that, and I'm not an introvert. You probably know I'm straight up extrovert, like love the people, want to be around the people, et cetera. But most of our clients are introverts. Okay.
Interesting.
I think, yes. And I think that this is a very interesting point to make because truly they are just having a conversation.
Yes.
They are having a one-on-one conversation, a one-on-two conversation like I'm having today, but a small conversation. Okay. And they're not in front of a big group of people. They're not at a big event doing XYZ. They're not, whatever. They are literally arriving at a certain time, at a certain place to have a conversation with someone who's interested in what it is that they're going to talk about. Okay. So I want you to have this mindset shift around like, well, I don't like to be out there, in front of all the people or doing whatever. That's not what podcast guesting is. It truly is a conversation that's recorded and then put out later. So the other thing that people get really hung up on that you brought up so rightly is like, okay, I'm in. Like, I want to be on some podcasts. Like, how do I now get myself, how do I start pitching myself to those opportunities? And the first thing I'm going to say is going to hurt a little bit, but you need to be ready to get the no. Okay. You need to be ready and understand that you're going to get ghosted. You're going to get no's, these things are going to happen. So I just want you to be prepared for that. And it has nothing to do with you. Okay. I also think that's very important is we're pitching our clients all the time. We get no's, we get ghosted, etc. But a lot of time, again, we'll never know the reason, but like their schedule could be full. They could have just had someone on that talked about something similar, just hasn't aired yet. There's a million different reasons that we don't get a yes. Okay. So be aware that as long as you send a good pitch, like there's a million reasons why that didn't work out. Right. But with that being said, when you're getting started, what I really want you to do is I want you to think about the topics that make sense for you to be speaking on. Okay. The things that make sense for you to think about. 9 out of 10 times a client or a host, chooses a topic that we send them. All right. Or that is on behalf of our client. I think people think they're making it easy for hosts to say like, hey, I'd love to come on your show. Here's all the reasons I'm a badass. And then they make that like really long. And then they give like 3 bullet points of like things that they're an expert in. Like, they're like, you just tell me what you want to talk about. I'm an expert in marketing, branding, sales, like, whatever. And then they're like, let's chat. And I know y'all can't see, but they are both shaking their heads because they have seen these pitches.
Yeah.
And the problem is you're giving them another chore.
Yes.
You are post another thing that they have to then go do. And so instead you need to be coming with topics that make sense for their audience so that they can see that and immediately be like, yes, that is absolutely what my audience wants to hear about. Of course, they want to know that you know what you're talking about. But by the way, you can do that in a couple sentences. Okay. People get really, I don't know. People say, I don't know what it is, but I'll see some pictures sometimes. And I'm like, you literally talked about yourself for like 2 full paragraphs. Like that is not necessarily what the host needs, right? In that way. But I think coming up with those topics is a great way to get started because that is what's going to get you to the yes.
Mm-hmm. I love what you were saying about, people, I don't love it because we don't want to spend, 5 sentences talking about ourselves. But I think that's an important point to underscore. And it mirrors what we teach our students about the pitching process of, you want to cut straight to what is the value you're offering. But as you were talking about it, I think the instinct I'm guessing people feel is like, oh, I have to prove myself. Like, who am I to be on a podcast? What credentials do I have? What's your advice do you have for people to kind of get over that of, okay, I've never been on a podcast before. I'm open to the idea, but I'm hesitant to, again, who am I to be on a podcast?
Myself out there. Absolutely. And this is so common, particularly with women, right? We tend to second guess everything. We're not qualified enough, to your point. Exactly. I don't know what to say. What am I going to talk about? All these different things that are up on there. And first of all, one thing that I want everyone to know, and Nicki and Kate did this before we even started, is they're like, okay, just so you know, this isn't live. So we can cut out anything. Because for me, my issue is I'll accidentally swear all the time, you guys. Like that is it for me. That is my issue. And it is so reassuring to know that like, okay, if I say the wrong thing, if I'm rambling, I'm not answering something correctly, I could just say to a host like, hey, I'm sorry, do you mind if you ask me that question again and we can start this over, right? And I just want to put this caveat in there because I think it's important for people to know these aren't live. 99% of the time we're recording podcast interviews, they are not live. I did have one that was live the other day, but I wouldn't have that be like the first interview I'd ever done. You know what I mean? So I think that's important. I also think it's important to note that you're going to sweat and stumble your way through your first couple interviews. Okay. Like everyone does. So, it's a muscle. It is absolutely a muscle. Nicki worked with us and was on a ton of shows working with us. Muscle, like I know you have the value of that of like, it's repetition. It's getting out there. It's doing it over and over and you become more comfortable as you go. But the big thing that I like to say to people, Kate, to answer your question, and the thing that I want you to ask yourself is literally, what is the worst that can happen? What is the worst thing that can happen by putting myself out there, pitching myself to some shows, getting on shows? It's almost like pitching is one thing, but then actually getting the yes and needing to go on the show is a whole other thing. And so I always like to ask that question of like, what do you think is the worst that can happen? And people have their various things, right? Like just what I talked about. But I truly believe that the worst thing that can happen is you do not put yourself out there, because your business will not grow. I have so many people that come to me that are at the point where they're like, I built my business on referrals. This is where, I've been, I'm really good at what I do, etc. But the referrals have dried up, or I'm just not getting that many. And they realize that they have not been putting in the work to get in front of new audiences regularly, right? And so the fact of the matter is our business won't grow unless we're getting in front of new people. And so that is really what it comes down to, is what I believe that worst thing that could happen. And also knowing that when you go on shows, you're there in a service over self-promotion attitude. Okay. Like if I were to come on a show and just talk about how awesome I was, like what a boring show that would be, right? Like I'd be like, and then I, and then we, no one wants to listen to that. Like that's not, that's not enjoyable for anybody. But when I come with service, when I come with that attitude of I'm here to share my knowledge so that your audience can become even better, that I think helps a lot of people alleviate that fear too of like, I'm just going on a show to talk about me. No, you're going on a show to talk about what it is that you actually know, you're an expert in.
Exactly. Well, and quite frankly too, from the podcast host perspective, having been on both sides of the mic, but it's still just one mic anyway. So that doesn't really work. But
from the left side and from the right side. Yeah, exactly.
But from the podcast host perspective, guys, if you were on and you're stumbling or you're and there are lots of pauses, it's not going to go on the air like that. That's what editors are for. Because if someone is putting out a podcast, they want to put out the best possible podcast that they can. So if there's stuff where you kind of ramble a little bit and you didn't realize it, guess what? They're going to go in there and they're going to clip it out. Or if something terrible happens and you I don't know, you pass out in the middle of that, probably. I hope that you don't. But you I don't know, throw up or you can't.
I did see a video
the words happen.
Ear collapsing, like while they were in a thing, and they just like got back, like it's hilarious.
That's humanizing at least in that. I think that's great.
But what I was going to say
is
chair
collapses, you can use it, Nikki.
I will.
I know you would.
Put that all over the social, with love. But the worst case scenario, something like that happened. Guess what? They're not going to use it. Yeah. It's not like I'm going to go there and they're going to embarrass myself. I'm going to embarrass myself and they're going to put it out into the world. No host is going to find that useful. If you are not on their podcast giving good advice for their audience, helping their audience, they're just not going to use it. So even if you're like, I'm going to embarrass myself, it's the worst possible thing, it's just not going to go live. So put that out of your head. If you're thinking something terrible is going to happen, it's going to happen. And even if you ramble a little bit, you know what? That's what editors, it's literally what we pay our editors for. And boy, do I make our editors work. But they're going to go in there and slice it up.
It's also authentic.
Yes.
And that's what people are searching for, like in a world driven by AI, we want to hear someone's actual thoughts. We want to be able to feel like we relate to them. You know what I mean? And so even if you do ramble a little bit, you stutter a little bit, you tell a story that maybe was a little off topic, right? Whatever. That's what people relate to, right? That's where that know, like, and trust factor gets up so dramatically. So you shouldn't be a robot, right? You should not here just answering things with no emotion and no inflection or anything like that. People want to hear the real you. That's what they like.
Yeah, exactly. And there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm so excited to be here. You have to excuse me. I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm really looking forward to this conversation. That's what you're feeling. Say it, because that's all it is. And I know that we tend to think, oh my goodness, there are going to be all these people listening. Yeah, later on. But right now, it's just, Christina, to your point earlier, it's just a conversation. At that moment, nobody else listening in. You're just talking to someone else.
Just listening to a podcast this morning, Meta. And they were talking about that, making how to talk to people. I think it was in a mini series The Atlantic did a while ago. But it was talking about how with introvert, they were talking to hairdressers and how do you make small talk and how the hairdressers do this. And they were like, do you consider yourself extroverts? And both of them were like, no. They're like, when we are introverts, but it's a one-on-one conversation. We get right to the meat of the conversation.
They're like, man, my hairdresser gets in there.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. Yes. I'm always just like, dang girl, let me like have a sip of my coffee.
Right?
Yeah. They're like, what's the hot goss? But I found that fascinating that it made me rethink because I consider myself an introvert, kind of introvert, but like, that one-on-one coverage is so much easier than going into, it's not like going into a party full of people and having to talk about the weather with 5 different people and then come up with topics. You're talking about something you know about with one human. And I think, that's so much easier and such a different.
You feel so much more comfortable because you're like, I'm just talking, I'm just talking to this one person. Like we're just everyone feels about their hairdresser, but I tell her everything. You know what I mean? Like she knows literally everything about my life. Like, and vice versa. You know what I mean? And so, she's got secrets she could take to the grave. You know what I mean? And like, there's stuff there that like, I'm not even going to share. But when you're sitting there for 4 hours, this is kind of, what happens. Cause I'm very gray, you guys. So that's all.
No matter what, it's 4 hours.
It takes some
Yeah. The men listening are like 4 hours. The women are like,
my husband is always
4
like,
hours.
what are you even doing? I'm like, sitting, like mainly just sitting.
Taking a break, you know what?
Yeah, I'm doing the thing. Well, I have it good because mine's a nail tech, so she does my pedi on my hair. Guys, it's efficiency. If you can never find that combo, that's the one right there.
That is the way to go. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Well, and to go back earlier, the what am I going to talk about, right? I think that we forget that number one, they're going to ask you questions. Yes. And if it's they're going to, you're not going to have to come up with all the topics, but at the same time too, you will go in with ideas of things to talk about. You are there as a guest to share your expertise, but to also help that podcast host's audience learn. You're coming in to benefit them in some way, shape, or form. And this will be part of the pitch, certainly, but it will be part of something you will talk about with the podcast host, probably in advance, what you're going to talk about, what the audience is going to learn from you. So having that idea in advance of like, okay, I'm gonna talk about this. I'm gonna talk about, I'm talking about how many business owners, the most common mistake a business owner makes if they're writing their own stuff or if they want to know. You're going to go in with something to talk about. It's not like at a cocktail party when you go and you're like, what do you do? How do you know the Johnsons, or quite frankly too, at the hairdressers. And you're like, so what movies have you watched? There's substance to it going into it.
Yes, absolutely. You guys know what you're going to be talking about. To your point, it's a conversation. It's going to veer, in other ways and stuff like that. But you're really going into this about as prepared as you could possibly go into a conversation. And like we spoke about earlier, it's going to get easier and easier as you get asked questions that maybe aren't the standard ones to be able to kind of go off that and answer those, in that way too, because you're just going to feel more comfortable in front of the mic the more you do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if they're good hosts, I feel like they put you at ease too, to make it a comfortable conversation.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And one thing I really recommend, Nicki knows this because I remember I coached her on this a little bit, was like, you got to listen to an episode of the show before you have your guest spot. Even if you've listened to it before, you know what I mean? Like, even if I'm a longtime fan of a show, I'm still going to make sure I listen to an episode within 48 hours before I am doing my actual interview. Mm-hmm. And the reason that I say this right now is because it will help you start thinking about some of the stuff that host is probably going to ask you, right? Like, how do they kind of intro their guests? Like, what do they say at the end? Do they have any things that they ask everybody? Start kind of getting in there and thinking about that stuff a little bit. It'll also get you really pumped up, to do the interview and things like that. Because you'll get really excited about, I'm going to go have this conversation with this person and it's going to be awesome. But that is a really great way to kind of get those wheels turning too on like, what might we be talking about and what might be some questions that they're going to ask.
Mm-hmm. And props to Christina because she listened to our SEO episode before coming on and had some good energy. And it gives you a conversation starter too, which not that you needed one, but I feel like it was,
100%. And hot tip, it signals to that podcast host that you are paying attention, that you didn't just show up here without any prep work, without anything. You are just giving them a subtle clue of like, girl, I'm ready. Like, let's go. Like, I'm excited. I was listening to an episode. I'm ready to, I'm ready to start chatting. I'm ready to have this conversation. And that will put a podcast host at ease. Okay. And you're not saying it blatantly. You're not doing whatever. You're actually taking something from that conversation or from what you listened to that you found value in and putting it out there genuinely. But I can't even tell you the amount of times I kind of talk about how I do this and how I recommend people do this. And then hosts are like, dang, you did do that. You know what I mean? And so it is very, very true that it just puts everybody in a really good vibe and mindset for when you start the actual recorded conversation.
Yeah, exactly. It signals to a podcast host that they're working with a pro.
Yes.
And that is, to your point, Christina, that really does. It goes, oh, okay. All right. This is going to be good. This is going to be a good conversation. I'm not going to have to lead too much. I'm not going to have to. Yeah.
Practicing what you preach too. Yes. I think that's huge.
Exactly.
I mean, come on. And it works. Hey.
Yeah.
We can testify.
What other insider tips do you have for us?
One of my biggest insider tips that I'm down to share with your audience for sure is another thing I coach on is the host relationships. I will say that this is one of our clients' biggest surprises when they work with us, how much I coach on this and how big that can look in their business. And what I mean by that is at the end of the conversation, at the end of an interview, we hit end on record. This will happen, whenever we're done with our conversation here soon. I always thank a host profusely for having me on. Guys, if you don't have a podcast, it is so much work to put on a podcast. So I am always, always thanking the host genuinely for getting me on top of their platform because I know it's a lot of work. But then the next thing I say is a phrase that changes everything. And that is, now what value can I provide to you? And I come with ideas. Okay. I know they maybe have a membership, if they maybe have a mastermind, maybe they don't, maybe they have a summit, maybe not, maybe they don't have any of those things, but those are great places for me to say, I would love to come do a training in your program. I would love to come do XYZ. I have done 2 trainings this week in programs based off of podcast interviews that I've done literally this week alone. And guess what? I've had discovery calls booked off both of them. So this is an excellent, excellent way to further that relationship with the host by, again, providing them with even more value for their audience, but you're getting in an even smaller, more tightly knit community where, again, they trust that host like so much, right? That is who they go to for their information. So those are great ways to come. At the very least, you can invite someone to be in an affiliate, if you have a program or something like that. And again, the thing that I'll always do is say, if you'd like to do a 15-minute, Instagram live when this episode airs, that's always something that I'm down to do because that's a really great way for them to get in front of my audience, and vice versa as well. So that I will say, when we've had multiple clients wrap up, they've said that's been like the biggest surprise for them is those host relationships that they've built over the time of guesting on all those shows. So do not sleep on the host relationship and how you can bring value to the hosts that have you on their show.
It's so good. It's all about providing value first. But when you provide value first, it comes back to you.
Comes back.
So important. Yeah.
And it's way warmer of an opportunity, right? Like, you just had a real conversation with someone. They know you, they trust you, at that point, et cetera. So when you have that, literally this morning, I was on another podcast interview and I brought this up to her afterwards. She has a membership and I was like, hey, I'd be happy to come talk to your membership. And she was like, no one's ever said that before. She's like, I would love to have you do that. Like, we have a guest expert every month. Like, I'd love to have you come in early next year. And I was like, hell yeah. Like, let's get it. You know what I mean? So it's absolutely like, you guys, that should tell you right there, 95% of people aren't doing it. So just by doing that and coming with those ideas, you're going to get yourself in opportunities that you wouldn't have had otherwise.
It's great. I love it. I love it. So, we love Christina, so stay tuned. CCA student. Just putting this spoiler alert out.
I don't want to say it, but I was going to say that. Yeah.
Just saying. If she makes an offer after the cameras are off, so stay tuned, CCA students.
I love it. I would be honored to, for real. So,
well, yes. And we already love you. We know that. And clearly you are an expert that we respect a great deal. So yeah, CCA students, stay tuned.
Get in there. If
But
you're not
Christina,
taking it in so you can get that private training. Okay.
Just saying.
There
She
we
said
go.
it. Didn't
There we
have to
go.
say it. Didn't say it.
Yep.
Yeah. Christina, this has been super, super fantastic. And I know that your first of all, we know your company is fantastic, but you have a lot of resources and a lot for people to look at and learn from. So what is the best way for someone to follow you or to get in touch with you?
Absolutely. So a really great thing to do is I have a quiz at podcastpublicityquiz.com. I love a good vanity URL, so you're always going to hear vanity URL. But that quiz is a really great way to know, hey, does this make sense as something to do on my own? And in that case, we have a training that's all about how you can build out your pitch template and pitch yourself. And then we also have information on our full service, which is like what Nicki was a client of, where we help, where we actually pitch our clients to opportunities there. You can also always find me on Instagram at publicityxchristina with a CH. It was, it's publicity by Christina, and I thought I was so clever. And then it's just kind of like the bane of my existence. I was like, it'll be like South by Southwest, but see, it's like publicity by. Guys, I'm from Portland. We think we're really cool, and we like to.
And then we're gonna have to
walk it back a little bit. People are like, so it's an X? I'm like, no, no, it is, but it's a by. Anyways, that's where you can come find me on Instagram. I post what I think are hilarious things all the time. So you can come find me there.
I do. I enjoy them. Yeah.
Thank you, Nick.
Well, and so we'll put all the links in the show notes here, but guys, definitely take the quiz. And I want to say too, if you're thinking, well, all right, I'll write my own pitches, certainly a great place to start. But don't be closed off to the idea of hiring a professional to help you. And certainly this is something you want to plan, because we all need to be careful about how, as business owners, how we spend our money. But if you start getting on podcasts on your own and you start noticing people are hiring you from that, it may make sense for this to be one of the things that you outsource. If you can directly tie this, and it's very likely to be able to, but take it step by step. But if you can directly tie back revenue to doing this, then it may make more sense to, at a certain point, to take it off of your plate and give it to someone else, so that you then have more time to do the podcast or to do the client work and all of that kind of thing. So just want to, if you're like, well, hiring an agency, just suspend judgment for a little bit and dig into Christina's stuff.
Yeah, just put it in there, just plant a little seed. But I mean, you're exactly right. A great way to start is getting yourself booked on shows and seeing what that looks like in your business, right? Like, is this making a difference? Is this getting great leads into my business for me and keeping me in that way? And then to your point, if it does, it's like, all right, then maybe this becomes a main marketing driver for me. And this becomes what we invest, I invest in, so that I am just having to show up to the interviews, right? Someone else is handling all the pitching, follow-up, scheduling, all that good stuff, so that I'm just coming in for this part right there. And so that's a really great place to start. Or if you've already been on some podcasts, it works and you're ready to take it up a notch, then that's another really great time to kind of think about bringing maybe an agency in to do that for you.
Love it. I love it. Christina, this was fantastic and just as full of value as I knew that it would be. Thank you so much for joining us. This a pleasure as always. It's always just fun to chat with you as well.
I know, it's fun to chat with you guys too. And thank you so much. I love being in front of your audience. My degree was in creative writing, so writers, I absolutely love being around, etc. And so I can't wait to help you guys make more money. And I hope this is a really great way that you can kind of get started doing that.
Oh, fantastic. And yeah, it is, guys. It is. Bookmark this one. Bookmark it. And so with that, we will catch you guys in the next episode. Bye, everybody. Like what you heard? Hit subscribe so you never miss a video. And if you're ready to take the first step toward becoming a copywriter yourself, sign up for a free video training right here.